with in connections. Today we're going to do a talk on in-room connections and bandwidth management and how we're going to go into the future and where we've come from. The first thing starts off in the 2000 range when we started offering internet to guests. The best bandwidth at the time was probably a 1 megabit connection. Some vendors were selling it at $1,200 for a simple T1. That price model has changed dramatically. We are now offering 100 megabit connections. We have many sites that are running 100 by 100. We have a lot of sites that are on cable modem with 100 by 10. We actually bond those together in our routers, and now we provide 200 megabit connections, and we see that actively used. And on our network, you'll be able to actually link in and see some of that activity. The key for that growth is that obviously the user base, the guests. In 2002, 1 out of 5 guests carried a laptop computer, and that resulted in a 100-room hotel, you probably see 20 users a night. Now, and the math is kind of interesting, now every guest is carrying up to 3 devices. So in that same 100-room property, if you do the math, 100 people now have 300 devices. So you've gone from 20 to 300. And the bandwidth that they consume, the content that they're looking at with the video is potentially overwhelming. Netflix, streaming video, but even live chatting, which is very demanding on your network. And so the only way that you're going to manage this going forward, you just won't be able to keep up because you'll get bad players. And there's nothing wrong with these guests, but they come in and they're just going to consume as much bandwidth using peer-to-peer sharing, illegal content download, and you're going to have to manage that. We do that through bandwidth management on every guest. We have multiple profiles we can employ, but we manage those guests. The key thing, though, is you want to set up something like a 5 megabit. If you have, let's just say, a 100 megabit connection, you might want to give a guest a meg. Well, you don't. That gives you 100 guests you can actively support. But a meg isn't responsive. It doesn't feel right. And not all guests need 1 meg all the time. So do you set it up to a 5 megabit connection, and then suddenly really you get 3 or 4 guests in there and they're sucking up their 5 meg and they're consuming all of your bandwidth. So what the next evolution is bursting. Bursting is a phenomenal technology. What that's going to allow you to do, and what that allows us to do, is say we're going to give a guest a 5 megabit burst of connectivity. If they're a good guest and they're surfing a web page, they're going to go to a web page, they're going to get a huge, very responsive connection, and then they're going to start consuming the data. As they read their data, they're not using their bandwidth. And so they get the burst, and then 10, 15 seconds later, 20 seconds later, they go to another web page, they get the same burst. But if they're a bad player and they're starting to do a lot of file sharing and they're huge picture downloads or huge picture uploads or video downloads, it's just consuming the network. What happens is after the initial burst, it manages them back down to a reasonable amount. So, for example, you'll often see bursting, if you offer this technology, you'll often see bursting that's like 5 by 1, which means we're going to give you 5 megabits for about 6 seconds, and then after that we're going to manage you down to 1 megabit. Now typically people don't even use 1 megabit, so if you're using the internet the way we'd like to see, what we call a good user, you're going to get this very fast responsive 5 megabits. And then if you start overusing your internet, you're going to get managed back down to 1 megabit. Now that works for a lot of clients, especially ones with 100 by 100 megabit connections, but some are more restrictive. We only might have a 20 megabit connection or even a 10 megabit connection. And so that has to be profile managed. We're still going to give 3 to 4 megabit on an initial connection, on an initial burst, but they might be managed down to a 760 kilobit, something less even than a megabit. And that active management is where the value proposition comes in, because that can only be done. It's not one size fits all. It's based upon the number of rooms, based upon the ISP connection, maybe the quality of the ISP connection, and the nature of the guests that are at the properties. For example, a business connection might need something that's more of a synchronous thing because they're doing VPNs, and so you've got to manage their bandwidth for the guests to be more equal. So you're going to manage them down a little bit more so that their VPN performs correctly. Another place you might see it is at the vacation resorts. People go out, they take hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and all of a sudden they're going to be uploading. Well, you have to actively manage their upload down. Otherwise, they will consume all of the uploads. So what happens is that clogs up their internet. The key value here is the Network Operations Center. The guys on that center need to have, and the solution needs to be constantly on guard, looking for how the bandwidth is being utilized to best fit the property's profile. That's one of the things that we do extremely well at In-Room Connections. That's part of the value that we want to offer you. That's something that you need to have going forward if you're going to effectively meet your guest demands for the future. This has been Steve Gould. It's a simple tech talk about bandwidth management, bursting, and how to have enough out of your ISP to make your guests happy.